The millionaire issued an impossible challenge, and the street kid solved it in seconds. You're about to discover an incredible story that will completely change how you think about intelligence, education in the most spectacular ways. If you're ready for a journey that will challenge everything you believe about smart versus educated, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. Now let's dive into this amazing tale that begins on the streets of São Paulo, where a chance encounter is about to prove that genius recognizes no social boundaries. Chapter 1. When Worlds Collide, the Afternoon Sun blazed down on the chaotic streets of downtown São Paulo as tech billionaire Eduardo Vasquez stepped out of his armored Mercedes onto the sidewalk outside the city's most exclusive technology conference. At 45, Eduardo was Brazil's answer to Silicon Valley legends, a self-made entrepreneur whose software empire had made him worth $1.2 billion and earned him recognition as one of Latin America's most innovative minds. Eduardo adjusted his custom Italian suit as he walked toward the Copacabana Palace Hotel, where he was scheduled to deliver the keynote address to 2,000 of Brazil's top technology professionals. His presentation, titled "The Limits of Human Problem Solving," would argue that certain mathematical and logical challenges required formal education and sophisticated training to solve, that raw intelligence, while valuable, was no substitute for systematic learning and academic rigor. The irony of what was about to unfold could not have been more perfect. As Eduardo paused to check his phone outside the hotel, his attention was drawn to a commotion near a small crowd gathered around a makeshift cardboard table on the sidewalk. Street vendors, office workers on lunch break, and curious tourists had formed a circle around what appeared to be some kind of game or challenge. At the center of the crowd sat Miguel Santos, 14, a street kid whose torn sneakers and faded soccer jersey marked him as one of São Paulo's millions of children living on the margins of society. Miguel had been on the streets since he was 9, when his mother died and his father disappeared, leaving him to survive through a combination of odd jobs, street performances, and the mathematical puzzle games he had invented to earn coins from passers-by. What Eduardo couldn't see from his position was that Miguel possessed one of the most remarkable mathematical minds in Brazil, a natural genius for pattern recognition, logical reasoning, and problem-solving that had developed without a single day of formal education. Miguel had learned mathematics by observing the world around him, calculating change for street vendors, figuring odds for informal betting games, and creating increasingly complex puzzles that challenged adults with university degrees. "Ladies and gentlemen," Miguel called out in Portuguese, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had learned to survive by his wits. "I have here a mathematical challenge that has stumped professors, engineers, and even computer programmers. Anyone who can solve it wins 100 reais." The crowd murmured with interest. 100 reais was nearly a week's wages for many of them, but Miguel's challenges had gained local fame for being genuinely difficult. Over the past year, hundreds of people had attempted his puzzles, including mathematics teachers, university students, and business professionals. None had succeeded. Eduardo found himself drawn toward the crowd, despite his tight schedule. As someone who prided himself on intellectual superiority and problem-solving ability, he was curious about what kind of challenge a street child could pose that would stump educated adults. "What's the puzzle?" called out a man in a business suit who appeared to be an accountant or bank manager. Miguel smiled and pulled out a piece of cardboard covered with an intricate pattern of numbers, symbols, and geometric shapes. "This is a sequence puzzle combined with spatial reasoning and logical deduction. You have to identify the pattern, predict the next 3 elements in the sequence, and explain the mathematical principle that governs the entire system." Eduardo pushed through the crowd to get a better look at Miguel's puzzle. What he saw made him pause with genuine surprise. The challenge was far more sophisticated than anything he had expected from someone of Miguel's apparent background. The pattern involved prime number sequences, geometric progressions, and logical relationships that would challenge graduate-level mathematics students. "How long do we have to solve it?" asked the businessman. "As long as you need," Miguel replied. "But I'll tell you what, if someone can solve it in under 5 minutes, I'll double the prize to 200 reais." Several people in the crowd pulled out phones and notebooks, beginning to work on the puzzle with intense concentration. Eduardo watched with growing fascination as educated adults struggled with a problem created by a teenager living on the streets. After 20 minutes, the businessman gave up in frustration. "This is impossible. The pattern doesn't follow any standard mathematical progression." "That's because you're thinking inside the box," Miguel said with a grin. "Mathematics isn't just about formulas you learn in school. It's about seeing relationships that others miss." Eduardo felt his competitive instincts engage. Here was a child claiming that formal education was insufficient for mathematical problem-solving, exactly the opposite of the thesis he was about to present at the technology conference. "May I try?" Eduardo asked, stepping forward. Miguel looked up at the well-dressed stranger with interest. "Of course, sir. You look like someone who knows numbers." Eduardo studied the puzzle carefully, applying his MIT-trained analytical mind to the problem. He identified several mathematical principles at work: Fibonacci sequences, prime number relationships, geometric transformations. But after 15 minutes of intense concentration, he found himself no closer to a solution than the other challenges. "This is more complex than it appears," Eduardo admitted, feeling frustrated by his inability to solve a puzzle created by someone without formal education. "Would you like a hint?" Miguel offered with genuine kindness. Eduardo's pride rebelled against accepting help from a street child, but his curiosity won. "What kind of hint?" "Stop trying to solve it like a mathematician," Miguel said. "Start thinking like someone who needs to survive on the streets. Mathematics isn't just abstract theory. It's a tool for understanding how the world actually works." The hint struck Eduardo as both profound and puzzling. How could street survival provide insights into mathematical problem-solving that formal education couldn't? It was then that Eduardo made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Miguel," he said, "I'm Eduardo Vasquez. I'm a technology entrepreneur and I have a proposition for you." Miguel looked suspicious. Adults who made propositions to street kids usually had ulterior motives that had nothing to do with helping them. "I'm speaking at a technology conference in this hotel in 1 hour," Eduardo continued. "I'm going to present a theory about intelligence and problem-solving that your puzzle has just challenged. Would you be willing to come inside and demonstrate your mathematical abilities to an audience of Brazil's top technology professionals?" "Why would you want me to do that?" Miguel asked cautiously. Eduardo realized he wasn't entirely sure himself. Perhaps it was intellectual curiosity about how someone without formal education could create such sophisticated puzzles. Perhaps it was a desire to test his theories about intelligence and learning. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a recognition that his assumptions about intelligence and capability might be fundamentally wrong. "Because I think you might teach us something important about how mathematical thinking really works," Eduardo said honestly. Miguel studied Eduardo's face, looking for signs of deception or exploitation. What he saw instead was genuine curiosity and respect, something he rarely encountered from adults in positions of power. "What would I have to do?" "Just be yourself. Show them your puzzle. Explain how you created it. Maybe solve some problems they give you." Eduardo paused. "And Miguel, if you can, demonstrate your abilities to my satisfaction. I'll make sure you never have to worry about money again." The offer was both thrilling and terrifying. Miguel had learned to be suspicious of promises from wealthy adults, but something about Eduardo's manner suggested sincerity rather than exploitation. "Okay," Miguel said finally, "but I keep my puzzle until someone solves it fair and square." "Deal," Eduardo agreed. As they walked toward the hotel entrance, Eduardo felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He was about to present a street child to an audience of Brazil's most educated professionals, claiming that raw intelligence could match or exceed formal training. If Miguel failed to impress the audience, Eduardo would be humiliated. But if Miguel succeeded, Eduardo realized that everything he thought he knew about intelligence, education, and human potential was about to be put to the ultimate test. The stage was set for an encounter that would challenge every assumption about genius and education. If you're as intrigued as we are about Miguel's incredible mathematical abilities and Eduardo's bold decision, make sure you've hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, because what happens in that conference room will blow your mind. Chapter 2. the challenge that shook Silicon Valley South. The main ballroom of the Copacabana Palace Hotel fell silent as Eduardo Vasquez took the stage, but not for the reasons the audience expected. Instead of beginning his prepared presentation about the limits of untrained intelligence, Eduardo stood before 2,000 of Brazil's most successful technology professionals with a street kid beside him and a completely different message. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eduardo began, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "I was prepared to argue today that certain types of problem-solving require formal education and systematic training. I was going to present research showing that while raw intelligence is valuable, it cannot match the capabilities developed through rigorous academic study." Murmurs rippled through the audience as they noticed Miguel standing awkwardly beside the podium, his street clothes a stark contrast to the suits and designer dresses filling the ballroom. "However," Eduardo continued, 30 minutes ago, I encountered someone who has forced me to question everything I thought I knew about intelligence and capability. This is Miguel Santos, and he has created a mathematical puzzle that has stumped university professors, computer programmers, and yes, even me." The audience buzzed with curiosity and skepticism. Dr. Patricia Rodriguez, a computer science professor from the University of São Paulo, leaned forward with obvious doubt. "Eduardo, surely you're not suggesting that someone without formal education could pose mathematical challenges that trained professionals cannot solve?" "I'm not suggesting it," Eduardo replied. "I'm about to prove it." Eduardo gestured for Miguel to step forward. The teenager looked overwhelmed by the sea of faces, but drew strength from the mathematical confidence that had helped him survive on the streets. "Miguel, would you please show our audience your puzzle?" Miguel pulled out his cardboard creation and held it up for the audience to see. Even from a distance, the complexity was apparent. Layers of numerical sequences, geometric patterns, and symbolic relationships that seemed to shift and change as viewers tried to focus on individual elements. "This puzzle," Miguel said in Portuguese, his voice growing stronger as he began explaining something he understood completely, "combines three different mathematical concepts that most people study separately. But on the streets you learn that everything is connected. Money connects to time, space connects to probability, survival connects to pattern recognition." Dr. Carlos Martinez, a senior software engineer from Google's São Paulo office, raised his hand. "May I examine the puzzle more closely?" Miguel nodded and handed over his creation. Dr. Martinez studied it for several minutes, his expression growing increasingly perplexed. "This is extraordinary. The pattern involves prime number sequences, but they're embedded within geometric transformations that affect the logical relationships between elements." "Can you solve it?" Eduardo asked. "I would need computational assistance and probably several hours of analysis, Doctor," Martinez admitted. "The pattern recognition required is beyond what I could accomplish manually." A woman in the audience stood up. "With respect, this seems like an elaborate publicity stunt. Surely the puzzle has been designed to appear complex while actually being simple." Miguel looked at Eduardo, who nodded encouragingly. "Ma'am," Miguel said politely, "would you like to create a challenge for me instead? Something you think is difficult?" The woman, who introduced herself as Dr. Ana Silva, from the Brazilian Institute of Technology, considered this proposition. "Very well. I'll give you a problem that requires both mathematical reasoning and logical deduction." Dr. Silva walked to the front of the room and wrote a complex equation on the whiteboard, provided for Eduardo's presentation. The problem involved advanced calculus, probability theory, and logical reasoning that would typically require university-level mathematics education. "This problem," Dr. Silva announced, "requires you to calculate optimal resource allocation under variable constraints while accounting for probability distributions and time-dependent factors." Miguel studied the equation for less than 30 seconds before asking, "Do you have a calculator?" "The point is to solve it without computational assistance," Dr. Silva replied somewhat smugly. "I don't need the calculator to solve it," Miguel said. "I need it to show you that my answer is correct." The audience fell completely silent as Miguel began working through the problem aloud, explaining his reasoning in terms that demonstrated not just mathematical ability, but intuitive understanding of the underlying principles. "This is actually a resource optimization problem like the ones I solve every day," Miguel said as he worked. On the streets, you have limited money, limited time, limited opportunities. You need to calculate the best return on investment for every decision. Which corner to work, which hours are most profitable, how. To maximize income while minimizing risk. As Miguel continued his explanation, something remarkable became apparent. He wasn't just solving the mathematical equation. He was revealing how abstract academic mathematics connected to real-world survival challenges that he faced every day. The probability distribution here is like calculating whether to spend your last 10 reais on food for today or save it for bus fare to reach a better location tomorrow. Miguel continued. The time-dependent factors are like knowing that businessmen' lunch hours generate more coin donations than tourist evening hours. Dr. Silva watched in amazement as Miguel solved her advanced mathematics problem using practical wisdom learned from street survival. His approach was unorthodox but mathematically sound, demonstrating understanding of complex principles through lived experience rather than academic study. The answer is 847.3, with a confidence interval of 94.2%, Miguel announced, after 4 minutes of calculations performed entirely in his head. Dr. Silva pulled out her phone and ran the equation through a sophisticated mathematical software program. After several minutes, she looked up with an expression of shocked disbelief. "He's correct," she announced to the stunned audience. "Not just correct. He achieved computational accuracy without any electronic assistance." The ballroom erupted in amazed discussion as Brazil's technology elite tried to process what they had just witnessed. A street child with no formal education had solved an advanced mathematics problem faster and more accurately than professionals with multiple degrees. But Miguel wasn't finished. "Dr. Silva," he said respectfully, "your equation was very elegant, but it had a built-in assumption that limited its real-world applications." "What assumption?" Dr. Silva asked, genuinely curious. "You assumed that all variables were independent, but in real situations, changing one factor affects all the others. On the streets, everything influences everything else. The weather affects foot traffic affects competition between vendors, competition affects optimal pricing strategies." Miguel walked to the whiteboard and modified Dr. Silva's equation, adding variables and relationships that accounted for interdependent factors. The revised problem was significantly more complex, but also more realistic. Now, the equation reflects how resource optimization actually works in complex environments, Miguel explained. The mathematics becomes harder, but the solutions become more useful. Eduardo watched this exchange with growing amazement. Miguel wasn't just demonstrating mathematical ability, he was showing how academic theory could be enhanced by practical experience and real-world understanding. Dr. Rodriguez from the University of São Paulo stood up. "Miguel, where did you learn to think about mathematics this way?" Miguel's answer was simple but profound. "When your life depends on making the right calculations, you learn to see patterns that others miss. Street mathematics isn't just about numbers. It's about survival, psychology, economics, and probability all working together." The audience sat in stunned silence as they realized that this teenager had just provided insights into applied mathematics that could revolutionize how they approached problem-solving in their own high-tech industries. Eduardo stepped back to the podium with a smile that mixed pride with humility. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe Miguel has just demonstrated something that will change how we think about intelligence, education, and human potential." But the demonstration was far from over. Eduardo was about to issue a challenge that would reveal the full extent of Miguel's extraordinary abilities and forever change both their lives. Chapter 3. The Impossible Made Possible. "Miguel," Eduardo announced to the captivated audience, "I have one more challenge for you. But this one isn't just mathematical. It's practical, and if you can solve it, it could change the technology industry in Brazil." Eduardo walked to a laptop connected to the large screen behind the podium. "For the past 3 years, my company has been trying to develop an algorithm that optimizes delivery routes for e-commerce in São Paulo's favelas. The challenge is enormous. Irregular street layouts, unpredictable traffic patterns, security considerations, and economic factors that change daily." The screen displayed a complex map of São Paulo showing delivery routes, traffic patterns, and demographic data. Our best programmers, using advanced AI and machine learning, have achieved 73% efficiency. The remaining 27% of optimization seems impossible because there are too many human variables that don't follow predictable patterns. Dr. Martinez from Google leaned forward with interest. Eduardo, this is exactly the type of problem that requires massive computational power and years of data analysis. You're not seriously suggesting. I'm suggesting that someone who has navigated these streets for years, who understands the human patterns that our algorithms miss, might see solutions that pure computational power cannot, Eduardo replied. Miguel studied the map on the screen with the same intensity he had brought to the mathematical puzzles. But instead of seeing abstract data points, he saw a representation of the world he knew intimately. Every favela, every dangerous intersection, every time of day when certain areas became impassable. Mr. Vasquez, Miguel said slowly, your algorithm is very sophisticated, but it's missing the most important factor, which is, people don't behave like mathematics, they behave like people. Miguel approached the screen and began pointing to specific areas on the map. Your algorithm says this route through Capão Redondo is optimal because it's the shortest distance, but between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., the local schools let out and children flood the streets. Delivery trucks can't move safely or quickly. The audience watched in fascination as Miguel continued his analysis. And this route through Villa Madalena looks efficient, but your system doesn't account for the informal street vendors who set up on different corners depending on football match schedules and weather patterns. Eduardo realized that Miguel was providing insights that years of data analysis and AI development had missed. What would you do differently? Miguel spent the next 20 minutes explaining modifications to the delivery algorithm that accounted for human behavioral patterns, cultural events, social dynamics, and survival strategies that he had learned through years of street experience. His suggestions weren't just theoretical, they were based on intimate knowledge of how São Paulo's communities actually functioned. The key, Miguel explained, is understanding that efficiency isn't just about distance and time. It's about predicting human behavior, respecting community rhythms, and adapting to situations that change faster than any computer can calculate. Dr. Silva from the Brazilian Institute of Technology looked skeptical. This is fascinating, but how would we test whether Miguel's insights actually improve algorithmic performance? Eduardo smiled. I propose we test it right now. He pulled out his phone and called his company's chief technology officer. Roberto, I need you to implement some real-time modifications to our delivery optimization system. I'm going to have someone provide you with route adjustments based on local knowledge. For the next hour, the entire technology conference became an impromptu testing ground for Miguel's theories. Eduardo's company ran delivery simulations using their existing algorithm alongside Miguel's human behavior modifications. The results were displayed in real time on the conference room screens. The improvements were dramatic and immediate. Routes that incorporated Miguel's insights about human patterns achieved 91% efficiency, an improvement that represented millions of dollars in cost savings and dramatically better service for customers in São Paulo's underserved communities. This is impossible, Dr. Rodriguez muttered, staring at the performance data. We've spent years trying to achieve these optimization levels. It's not impossible, Miguel said quietly. You were just solving the wrong problem. You were trying to optimize for mathematical perfection instead of human reality. Eduardo felt his worldview shifting fundamentally as he watched Miguel's insights transform his company's technology in real time. Miguel, how did you know that modifying these specific root factors would produce such dramatic improvements? Miguel's answer revealed the depth of his understanding. Because I've lived in these communities, I know that Donna Maria sets up her fruit stand on Tuesday mornings because that's when the wholesale market delivery comes. I know that the street football games in Villa Madalena happen every Sunday and block traffic for 3 hours. I know that during carnival season, entire neighborhoods change their rhythms. But how do you process all that information and apply it to algorithmic optimization? Dr. Martinez asked. The same way I survive on the streets, Miguel replied. You learn to see patterns, predict behavior, and adapt to changes faster than the people around you. If you can't do That you don't eat. The conference attendees realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. A teenager with no formal education had just revolutionized an advanced technology solution using nothing but practical intelligence and street-smart pattern recognition. But Eduardo had one final test that would determine Miguel's future. "Miguel," Eduardo said, "I want to offer you something. Not charity, not a scholarship, not a rescue from your current life. I want to offer you a partnership." The audience buzzed with excitement as Eduardo continued. "I want you to become the Chief Innovation Officer of Vasquez Technologies, with full responsibility for developing human-centered solutions to algorithmic challenges. Your job would be to teach our programmers and engineers how to think about technology problems the way you think about survival problems." Miguel looked stunned. "Mr. Vasquez, I'm 14 years old, and I've never been to school. How could I be a chief officer of anything?" "Because," Eduardo replied, "you've just demonstrated that formal education isn't the only path to expertise. You possess practical intelligence and problem-solving abilities that can't be taught in universities. You see patterns that trained professionals miss, and you understand human behavior in ways that our algorithms never will." Eduardo paused, looking directly at Miguel. "Besides, you've been the CEO of your own survival enterprise for 5 years. You've been managing resources, calculating risks, optimizing outcomes, and adapting to changing conditions every single day. That's exactly the kind of leadership experience our technology industry needs." The offer was revolutionary, not just for Miguel, but for an industry that had traditionally valued formal credentials over practical intelligence. Eduardo was proposing to place a street child in one of the highest positions at a billion-dollar technology company based purely on demonstrated capability rather than educational background. Miguel looked out at the audience of successful professionals who had just witnessed his abilities, then back at Eduardo. "If I accept this position, I want one condition." "What's that?" "I want to create a program that identifies other kids like me, smart kids living on the streets who could contribute to technology and business if someone gave them the chance." Eduardo smiled broadly. "Miguel, I think that's the most brilliant business proposal I've heard all year." As the audience erupted in applause, Eduardo realized that his theory about the limits of untrained intelligence had been completely shattered. Miguel had proven that genius exists independent of formal education, and that sometimes the most valuable insights come from those who have learned to survive by their wits rather than their credentials. The street kid who had solved impossible puzzles was about to become Brazil's youngest technology executive, proving that intelligence recognizes no social boundaries and that true innovation comes from understanding human reality rather than just mathematical theory. Chapter 4. The Genius Who Redefined Success. 1 year after that transformative day at the technology conference, Miguel Santos stood in his corner office on the 30th floor of the Vasquez Technologies Tower, looking out over the sprawling city of São Paulo, where he had once lived on the streets. The view from his window included several favelas, where he had spent his childhood, now connected to the digital economy through programs he had designed and implemented. The transformation had been remarkable, but not in the ways most people expected. Miguel hadn't been changed by wealth and success. Instead, he had used his new position to change how an entire industry thought about intelligence, innovation, and human potential. "The quarterly report shows exceptional results," Miguel announced to the board of directors, his presentation displaying metrics that would have seemed impossible just 12 months earlier. "Our human-centered algorithm optimization has improved delivery efficiency by 34%, while reducing costs by 28%. More importantly, we've created employment opportunities for over 2,000 people in previously underserved communities." Eduardo watched with pride as Miguel led the meeting with the same confidence he had shown solving mathematical puzzles on the street. But Miguel's success hadn't been limited to technological innovation. He had revolutionized how Vasquez Technologies approached every aspect of business. The Street Smart initiative has identified 47 young people with exceptional problem-solving abilities, Miguel continued. "We've provided them with mentorship, technology training, and entry-level positions that utilize their practical intelligence while helping them develop formal skills." Dr. Patricia Rodriguez, who had joined Vasquez Technologies as Director of Educational Innovation after witnessing Miguel's demonstration, smiled as she added to his report. Miguel's approach to talent identification has completely changed our hiring practices. We now assess practical intelligence alongside formal education, and our innovation metrics have improved dramatically. The Street Smart initiative had become a model for technology companies worldwide. Miguel had created assessment tools that identified mathematical reasoning, pattern recognition, and problem-solving abilities regardless of educational background. The program had discovered extraordinary talent among street vendors, domestic workers, informal entrepreneurs, and young people who had never attended traditional schools. Our newest success story is Sofia Martinez, Miguel reported, pulling up a photo of a young woman who had been selling candy on buses just 6 months earlier. Sofia identified a flaw in our mobile payment security protocol that our cybersecurity team had missed. She's now leading our financial technology security division. The board members, initially skeptical of Miguel's unconventional approaches, had become his strongest supporters as his methods produced results that exceeded every expectation. Vasquez Technologies had become one of Brazil's fastest-growing companies, with innovations that consistently outperformed competitors who relied solely on traditional hiring and development practices. But Miguel's impact extended far beyond corporate success. The Community Integration Program has established technology centers in 12 favelas, Miguel continued. These centers aren't just providing computer access, they're creating local innovation hubs where residents develop solutions to community challenges using technology tools. Eduardo had watched with amazement as Miguel used his position to bridge the digital divide in ways that traditional corporate social responsibility programs had never achieved. Instead of imposing external solutions, Miguel worked with communities to identify their own problems and develop their own technological solutions. Miguel, asked board member Dr. Carlos Santos, what's been the most surprising discovery from your community work? Miguel smiled. The most surprising thing is that intelligence and innovation exist everywhere, but most of our society has never learned how to recognize and nurture them. Every favela has young people who could be world-class programmers, engineers, or entrepreneurs if someone gave them the tools and opportunities. The truth of Miguel's observation had been proven repeatedly through the Street Smart initiative. Young people who had been dismissed as uneducated or disadvantaged were developing mobile applications, creating business solutions, and solving technical problems that impressed university-trained professionals. What about your own continued education? Dr. Rodriguez asked. Have you found value in formal academic study? Miguel considered the question thoughtfully. I've been taking university courses in computer science and business administration, but they complement rather than replace the practical intelligence I developed on the streets. The combination of theoretical knowledge and real-world experience creates capabilities that neither approach could achieve alone. Miguel had indeed enrolled in university programs, but as a working professional seeking to expand his knowledge rather than as someone trying to legitimize his intelligence. His academic performance was exceptional, but his professors often learned as much from his practical insights as he learned from their theoretical frameworks. After the board meeting, Eduardo and Miguel walked together through the company's innovation lab, where former street kids worked alongside MIT graduates to develop solutions for Latin America's most challenging problems. Miguel, Eduardo said, as they paused near a workstation where a young man was designing water purification systems for favela communities. I need to ask you something I should have asked a year ago. What's that? Do you ever regret accepting my offer? You could have taken the money I offered and built any kind of life you wanted. Instead, you chose the responsibility of changing an entire industry. Miguel looked thoughtful. Mr. Vasquez, a year ago I was surviving day by day, using my intelligence just to get enough food and find safe places to sleep. Now I'm using that same intelligence to create opportunities for thousands of people like me. How could I regret that? But you've given up your freedom. You have obligations, responsibilities, pressures that you never had on the streets. Miguel smiled. On the streets, I was free to starve. Here, I'm free to build something that matters. That's not a trade-off. That's an upgrade. As they reached Miguel's office, Eduardo reflected on how profoundly his understanding of success and intelligence had changed. A year ago, he had measured worth by credentials, education, and conventional achievements. Miguel had taught him that true genius was about solving problems, creating value, and improving lives regardless of where those capabilities were developed. "There's something I want to show you," Miguel said, pulling out a worn piece of cardboard, the same mathematical puzzle that had started their relationship. "You still have it?" "I keep it as a reminder," Miguel replied. "This puzzle represents something important, the idea that intelligence exists in unexpected places and takes unexpected forms. Every time someone underestimates human potential because of social class, education level, or life circumstances, they miss opportunities to discover extraordinary capabilities." Eduardo nodded, understanding that Miguel's puzzle had been more than a mathematical challenge. It had been a test of assumptions about intelligence and worth. "By the way," Miguel added with a grin, "I finally met someone who solved it." "Who?" "Ana Rodriguez, an 8-year-old girl who sells flowers outside the cathedral. She solved it in 43 seconds while explaining how the pattern reminded her of the way flower customers choose colors based on emotional patterns she's observed." Eduardo laughed, realizing that Miguel's story would continue discovering and nurturing intelligence wherever it appeared. The street kid who had solved impossible challenges was now creating a world where no one's potential would be overlooked because of their circumstances. As the sun set over São Paulo, Miguel looked out at the city that had shaped him and that he was now helping to reshape. Somewhere in those streets were other young minds waiting for someone to recognize their potential, other problem solvers whose intelligence could change the world if given the chance. Miguel Santos had proven that genius recognizes no social boundaries and that the most valuable innovations often come from those who have learned to survive by their wits. His journey from street kid to technology executive had demonstrated that true intelligence isn't about where you learn, but about how you think, how you adapt, and how you use your abilities to lift others up. The story of Miguel Santos and Eduardo Vasquez reminds us that intelligence and genius exist in the most unexpected places, often hidden by social circumstances that blind us to extraordinary potential. Miguel's journey from solving puzzles for coins to revolutionizing technology shows us that raw intelligence, practical wisdom, and street-smart thinking can be just as valuable as formal education, sometimes even more so. His success proves that when we look beyond credentials and social status, we can discover capabilities that change everything. If this story opened your eyes to the hidden genius all around us and inspired you to reconsider how we recognize human potential, please like this video to help us share this important message about intelligence without boundaries. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories about extraordinary minds in ordinary circumstances, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss content that could change how you see the world. Have you ever encountered unexpected intelligence or been surprised by someone's hidden capabilities? Share your story in the comments below, and remember, genius isn't about where you learned, but about how brilliantly you can solve the problems in front of you.